Chapter 22, DQ. With her head spinning, Francie stepped out onto the street. She was getting nowhere, and she only had this one day to figure everything out. "I've already thought about that enough," she scolded herself. Still, she couldn't help wondering if there was any way she could defy her grandfather and stay. She really didn't want to estrange him. He was exasperating, but she did love him, and she knew he loved her too. It was just that he had all these rules. She had to do this or that or the other thing, unless this or that or the other thing. She was under his thumb unless she could get a paid job. A real paid... Wait a minute. There was one hope, a glimmer of hope. The audition with a casting agent, tonight. She knew it wasn't really an audition, but it sort of was. If she could get a real acting job, a paying job, she wouldn't have to rely on her grandfather for money, and she'd be free to come and go as she pleased. She'd need to make a good impression at the Fredericksons tonight. She'd need something decent to wear. For cry-eye, she thought, am I really wondering about what I'm going to wear at a time like this? Apparently, yes, she realized as she pushed open the door to the one plausible clothing store in town. Well, she needed time to think. She might as well think while scraping hangers along a rack. She wondered if she should have prepared a short monologue or a song. She was never going to find anything she wanted to wear in this store, was she? While longing for her favorite East Village thrift store, she wondered if there was a piano at the Fredericksons. Otherwise, she could do that speech from... She stopped in mid-thought. There it was, in the midst of loon appliques and sailboat-themed clothes, a little black knit shift shot through with gold thread that made the dress glint as if it were fresh in from the rain. In this dress, she could do everything from Shakespeare to musical comedy. She could probably sing opera in this dress, if she could sing opera. She gulped at the price. She couldn't afford that. Then she remembered the cash her grandfather had given her and pulled it out of her pocket. $100. The money was plunked down on the counter, the dress bought. Granddad was already mad at her. How much worse could it get? At the post office, she ran into Potter, his arms full of packages. That must be tricky, she said. Tricky, he said. I mean, to pack your pots so they don't break. Then she thought of his lumpy, heavy pots and realized you'd practically have to take a sledgehammer to them to break them. He mumbled something about knowing how to pack the pots, then turned and walked out, leaving a little trail of dry clay from his dirty shoes. She had to brush off the crumbled clay he'd left on the counter before setting down her grandfather's package. After that errand was completed, she wondered whether to go to the law office to see if Mr. Sage was available. That would be one reason to go there. Her phone buzzed. It was Sage. "We'll get it all straightened out," he said. His voice was deep and reassuring. She pictured a rotund Santa Claus-like figure. "Don't worry, I'll call you this afternoon." So Francie had no reason, well, no legitimate reason, to go to the law office, and she walked by the door once, then twice, before turning and stepping inside. A receptionist sat behind a desk just inside the door, and she asked if she might speak to Nels, adding, "If he's busy, it's no problem. I shouldn't bother him at work. You know what? Just tell him never mind." "Just tell who never mind?" Francie turned to see Nels leaning against the door to an office, looking clean and pressed in a nice, crisp shirt and tie. How did he do that? The sleeves of his shirt were rolled up. The scratches on his arms made him look manly and tough, like he'd been wrestling bobcats. Her scratches made her look insane, like she wore barbed wire bracelets or something. He seemed happy to see her, which came as a pleasant surprise. "Come on," he said. "You want a DQ?" "DQ?" "Dairy Queen." She squinted at him. "You don't have Dairy Queens in New York?" We have queens in New York, she said. Also queens. Nels laughed. Who'd think New York would be so very behind on providing its populace with mono and diglycerides? What did you say this stuff was made of again? She asked, hurrying to lick up the drips as the cone melted into a puddle. Never mind, said Nels. You look terrible, by the way. Thank you, Francie said, and you're so charming. That's me. Nels led her across the street to a park where they sat on the playground swings. Is it true your great aunts are in jail? He asked. Things are worse than you can imagine. Francie almost cried into her ice cream. She explained about her aunts and about how her grandfather upbraided her as if she were a child in front of the sheriff, ruining her credibility. And now her granddad wanted her to leave with him first thing in the morning. She didn't know what she was going to do. So not much time, Nels said. Have you come up with any new leads? Well, I tried to think who would be back in the woods, and I remembered hearing Buck Jr. tell his dad that he had found the treasure at Enchantment. There's a legend about a treasure. Nels reached over and wiped a spot of ice cream off her nose. Okay, I don't want to shoot anything down, but has anybody suggested to you that Buck Jr. is full of BS? Yeah, Francie said. Darcy at the office. Okay, so you say it too. Maybe he's a whack job. Here's another thing. I saw Potter at the post office. His clothes were dirty, like he might have been shoveling dirt. Maybe it was Potter. Who's Potter? He's a potter. And you suspect him because his clothes were dirty? I mean, really dirty, like TJ's. Frenchie, Nels said. He's a potter. He works with clay. What would you expect? Yeah, I guess you're right. Okay, I'm reaching. She made circles in her swing, twisting the chains around and around, then letting go until the swing spun loose. I just want all this to make sense. I need it to. I thought I had it all figured out, and then it fell apart when Buck was poisoned. Now nothing makes sense anymore. There are so many unanswered questions. Like, 1, Warren. Did he or did he not commit suicide? My aunts are pretty convinced it wasn't suicide. If that's true, who killed him? Buck? Well, then who killed Buck? Was it the same killer both times? And what about all the other accidental deaths? Buck basically confessed to some of them, but not all. Was someone else arranging accidental deaths? And why? That's question number 1. What's question number 2? TJ disappearing for long sojourns. Related? It could be nothing but kid stuff. Do you think he's been back there digging too? She said. That would explain the dirty clothes. The first day I was here, Ginger teased him about digging, something silly, elephant bones. I used to dig up elephant bones when I was a kid, Nels said, devouring the last of his cone. Francie looked at him. Around here? Yeah, more or less. Find a lot? I think they were mostly moose bones, Nels admitted. So do you think TJ is digging up moose bones? A kid who reads National Geographic, Nels said. Francie remembered the stack of them next to TJ's bed. Nels was observant, she thought. He might actually know an elephant bone when he sees one. But, come on, seriously? Elephant bones? Francie said. Sure. The biggest elephants that ever lived, mammoths. During the Pleistocene era, there were mammoths running all over the place around here, or lumbering, or whatever they did. Mastodons, too. They're the 2 main elephant types during the Ice Age. It's conceivable they could be found around here. Francie stared at Nels. What was he doing with one of those sparkly-haired friends of Lettice who populated the Fredricksons' party? Guys, A smart girl wouldn't fall for a dim guy, but the reverse was not always the case. So you think he's digging up mammoth bones? I'm just saying, he said. That adorable smile played on his lips, and Francie couldn't stop staring at his lips. Fortunately, he started swinging, pumping his legs to make himself soar into the air, his tie flying behind him. Come on, he said. Keep up. But why in the dark, in the middle of the night? Francie wondered aloud. She pulled herself and her swing back as far as she could, and then flew. Impossible to say, Nell said. You need to talk to TJ. Yeah, Francie said, I'll go talk to him this afternoon. But anyway, about Buck Jr., don't you think that's worth following up on at least? Buck is usually not that hard to locate. Just find his boat. Ah, yes, the boat. If you want, I'll come with you, but I gotta work until 5. Nah, Francie jumped off the swing. I'm just gonna go see if I can find him. Don't do anything foolish, Nell said. Frenchie? She turned back. Did you hear me? Uh-huh, she said, but she already knew she would do whatever it took to find out what was going on.